thinking about it. Yay! Right.
So, welcome to the Parameters Committee meeting of April the 23rd.
No, the Technical Steering Committee.
All right, let me start. Welcome to the Technical Steering Committee meeting of April the 23rd, 2025. I will be acting as the chair for this meeting.
First item on the agenda, Parameters Committee.
Yeah, I was going to say, and we have apologies from Adam, who is attending an event. He's attending, I think, Builderfest.
It's Bidlerfest. Thank you very much.
It's pronounced Builder, Johnny. I understand.
Anyway,
so item number one, Parameter Committee proposals. So there was a meeting of the Parameter Committee last week. We discussed two proposals. One very straightforward is to enable byte string primitives in Plutus v2 as well as in Plutus v3. This is it's a very minor change. It just involves a small change to the Plutus cost model to allow that. Should be uncontentious. The second proposal is to increase the Plutus memory unit limits. This is responding to a request from the community, and this will assist dApp developers in a number of ways. First of all, it will make it easier for dApp developers to do their development. It will mean they have to do less fine-tuning. Secondly, it may enable them to execute larger scripts or to process more data than with the current limits. So the proposal is to increase the per TX, the per transaction and the per block memory unit limits by 25% each as a first step. Information that's been obtained from the performance and tracing team suggests that this is well within the capabilities, the benchmarked capabilities of the system, but obviously we would need to monitor the effect of the change, and it might be necessary to revert it. So assuming this group agrees, what we will need to do is to put together a formal proposal, submit that as a governance action. And what we're proposing to do, and here we would like the advice of the wider committee, is to do that as a single governance action. We'll have to explain why these two things are together. The complication is that if we don't do that, we essentially have to make one dependent on the other. So this is really just being done for administrative convenience. Also, we'd need to pay 2 deposits, of course, but that's a minor concern. So not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Any comments on that? Johnny, I think you've
no, as long as it's made explicitly clear that there is a dependency there, and that's why the two are being put together. You might face some criticism in process from various different ICC members against the Constitution, so you'll need to cite anything, especially a reversion plan, as previously noted.
Yes, and the reversion plan could have 2 parts depending on which parameter needs to be reverted. So the action we've taken is to start to socialize the proposal with the community using the IO and CF comms teams. So this is what we propose to do. And what we would do would be to present the proposal and say, please give us any feedback, and if we don't hear anything negative by a specific date, then we will go ahead with the process of constructing the change proposal, the parameter update proposal. Great. There should be scope for a further increase beyond that. We couldn't put a number on that at this point in time, but if all goes well, what we might consider is to, for example, increase the per block limit, but not the per TX limit, and that would allow more Plutus transactions in a block, more full-size Plutus transactions in a block, which is beneficial for some use cases.
Do we want a quick vote on that to accept that, or do we? Are there any?
Show of hands. Anyone feel we should not do that? So,
no dissent on my part. To just say it verbally, just in case it doesn't show up in the recording.
Yep, I have no dissent either. So.
Ben, you're comfortable with that?
No dissent.
Thank you very much. We will proceed on that basis. So the proposal will come from the parameter committee, but we will need to sign it off and make sure it's put on chain and properly socialized with the community. There's a lot going on chain, so we'll need to time this properly, of course. So moving on to item number 2. So I participated in a round table organised by the CF yesterday with a number of community members. It was a panel discussion which covered a set of priorities that the CF members had put together. So that this is not a full survey of the community in any sense. I will pass that on because it's interesting in terms of where the community focus is lying, or where some part of the community focus is lying. So Philip Tesaro was there, for example. What was clear from the discussion is that there's a lot of focus on layer 2, on enabling technologies. So the panel saw Mithril as being an important enabling technology, for example. They were very concerned by alternative node implementations. I know that we've considered that as part of the TSC proposal. We need to think how to address that properly as a community, I think. And one of their top priorities, well, their top priority, interestingly, was Paras rather than Laos. I know from our survey, Laos came out as a higher priority than Paras, which the panel members were very interested in the opportunities for faster settlement that Paras offers. They weren't concerned by the fact that it requires post facto checking. They seem to accept the time scales that we were discussing, so around 10 to 15 minutes with Paras and Laos combined, or around 10 minutes with Paras by itself. There was some concern about increased costs with Laos. I pointed out that there would also be increased cost with Paras. So cost to SPOs, finding a way to incentivize users clearly is going to be some kind of concern. Yeah, so you had this for a while.
Actually, you covered. So I was just going to make sure that the points were covered, most of which you've done. But I think I found it interesting looking at the results and talking to a few other people who attended, that there's, when in early history there was a Cardano settlement layer and a Cardano transaction layer. This was before we'd actually constructed any form of Plutus. And what I think is interesting here is they are. I have a concern that they're focusing on the transaction layer, and not realizing how the settlement layer is going to change. It was a transaction layer, as you say. They were focusing on the transaction layer of the processes, and they were ranking things in such a way that that actually they were potentially arming scalability hazards in the process, right? And that was my first concern. My second concern, I mean, and this is something we need to discuss with them. This is not like, you know, this. It's part of the fact that all this process is rushed, is that we're not able to have these conversations with them, know where they're lying. Secondly, I think I think they are probably underestimating the. I am seeing a lot of feedback from SPOs who really don't want to do any more without more money flowing towards them. I am very concerned that the incentives aren't there for a sufficient percentage of stake for PERAS to be enabled at the moment. That is one of my concerns. Well,
I will back up that concern with SPOs adding Mithril, which is a very lightweight thing to add to an SPO infrastructure, but there are a number of people who say, well, what are my incentives to do it? So that has come up for Mithril, at least so far.
I was about, yeah, that's basically it's sort of an evidence point. And a couple of weeks ago when I was in Paris and they were talking about this, I brought this up, there were people around the room that were proud that it had got to 22% of stake, right? So I think there's a position, there's a problem here. People may want these things, but actually they're not taking the other parts of the community along with them in an appropriate way to actually get those things enabled.
The one thing I will reference, though, is in both proposals, IOE and TSC, there is reference to a reworking of the reward scheme for SPOs, which may integrate some of this as part of its review process.
Absolutely. So the expectation with that was that it would address some of the issues to do with smaller stake pools, Johnny. So
But I imagine that incentivization for expansion of feature set as well would come into that part of a natural discussion about how to rework incentives.
Absolutely, and it might be that that the parameter committee, for example, might also need to consider the existing fee structure and whether what we have is sustainable. So we should consider that too. Absolutely. So apart from, so as you're saying, Neil, there's a very specific community here. Now, some of the community members felt we as the TSC should be taking on more of these layer 2 considerations. We had, in drawing up the scope for the TSC, deliberately scoped it quite tightly to cover layer 1. Partly because we felt that's where our expertise lies, but there's definitely a community demand, if you like, for similar levels of technical discussion and input for the transaction layer, as you're saying, Neil. So we need to think about how we do that. It may be that the TSC naturally evolves depending on which new members are elected to the committee. But we do need to be careful with overstretch.
I mean, I think as in all processes like this, we need to identify the gap. And I think we're getting towards identifying the gap, and then we can see how best to fill it. I mean, and I know that sounds sort of all delaying, but in order to have, as you say, we may not be the right body to do this. Maybe a way of doing this is forming something like an equivalent of a layer 2 parameter, a layer 2 discussion committee along the lines of the parameter committee. Right? I mean, I don't know. It's something we should discuss, but I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion today.
Marcus.
Yeah, just to jump in here with a little side note. So, Kevin, you have learned this format yesterday or experienced it, and I want to propose it again here. So whenever we as a committee have a feeling that we need some more input or a discussion, raise some awareness, then just feel free to ping me and I will organize such a roundtable talk about a specific topic. We will always try to invite a diverse set of participants so they can, the general idea of this roundtable format is to have different opinions, but with heads that are able to talk to each other and to discuss it in front of a wide audience. So it is a friendly format, it is informative, and whenever we need some more input, evidence, or also just raise awareness so that people start looking at it, feel free to ping me. I can organize such a roundtable talk. We will have one of us committee as a member, and we will look to invite others. You can suggest whoever you want, and then we organize it. My colleagues here with Denisio, Sebastian, and so on, they care about all the organization, the graphics, the announcements, the invitations. We have a preparation document for each of these roundtables. So Kevin, you had this link to this document. So there is a preparation. Everyone knows who are the other participants, can prepare, and can join the call 15 minutes ahead. So there is a backstage preparation and training. This is all you don't need to care about. Just to have it mentioned here, when we need it in the future, feel free to ping me.
Thank you very much, Marcus, and thank you very much for arranging that, for allowing us to participate as part of that session. It was very constructive.
And it does dovetail rather nicely into the next thing.
Yes, it does. But let me just complete my summary before we do that, Johnny. So the other interesting issue that came up from our perspective related to documentation. So again, there was, as we've heard before, there was a cry for better documentation. I dug into that so I asked the panel members, the people on the call, what the concern was. Concern, and this relates to Project ADAS and its strategy, relates mostly to these transaction layer documents rather than to the core document. So it may be that the effort is being misapplied in providing an improved set of core document. The need may be coming more from these transaction layer requirements. And as Neil said, that's partly because the original Plutus application backend was abandoned a few years ago. So there's a desperate need for documentation and assistance to help new dApp developers and providers come on board with the ecosystem. So that appears to be the gap. And when asked, the people on the call said, yes, the core documents are actually, with a few small tweaks, are actually extremely good. One of the tweaks being they would like to see a coherent treatment of all the ledger eras in a single document. So rather than having to look through what is now 3 or 4 separate documents, one for each era, they would like to see a collated set. But that is in preparation, I understand, by the formal ledger project. So interesting meeting, Neil.
I was just going to say this will lead into the maintenance contract, because this helps us define the gap on the documentation that we were concerned about. Right? So I mean,
exactly. Well, it helps us direct the focus to the right places, and yeah. What it's suggesting is the focus may have been on the wrong places.
Yeah,
so far. Yeah. So this should be passed on via the maintenance contract.
Yeah.
So Johnny, I think we come to item number 3. Which,
yeah.
do you want to speak to this?
Well, I mean, Neil and I have been doing a little bit of a tour between different places that already exist on Twitter or ex-Twitter. So we've been to Epoch's End and Cardano over coffee, and potentially, although it kind of clashes with all of these reconciliation meetings, Space Place was one of the things that was suggested by Kyle this weekend, but I don't know if it'll conflict or not. But open meetings with the reps community, is there any scope for us putting up our own thing rather than going to existing community things, or is it better to go to existing community things as they're already established?
Yeah, that's part of the question. So obviously going to the community arranged events, participating in them, I think is a great way to show that we actually care about the community. And this is one of the things we were proposing to put into our own budget proposal. So a greater community focus, including setting up, of course, our own workshops to talk directly to community members. I would also be open to having wider participation in a public part of our own meetings. So I think we've got to the stage where we're accepting that there may need to be some closed part of the meeting where the voting members of the TSC and maybe some other participants join, but having an open section where we encourage people to come along and we talk to them, I think is potentially helpful. So putting that to you as an option for wider engagement. Yeah.
They may find this type of format particularly dry and right. So I think we may wish to consider maybe running a regular round table or so. I don't know. Look, perhaps we could go and perhaps one of the things we could do, Johnny, is talk to some of these community members as who are already good at socializing.
Take on board suggestions on what they would like to see.
Yeah.
Consult with existing people, and the problem is I have my own biases and preferences of which spaces to go to as well. So it's not exactly that we went around the entire community. There's various spaces, but at least we began. We got a beachhead.
Yeah, it's a learning process on all of us. Yes.
So one of the suggestions. Sorry for interrupting, Neil. So one of the suggestions in the TSC budget proposal was for a regular technical town hall. So that could be the kind of meeting you were just proposing.
A lot of the topics that the people were I agree, but I think a lot of the interest was actually more in these other things, was more philosophical, social, and various other things. So I think there's an element of people wanting to chew the fat on some of the interplay between social and governance desires and the technical activities, which is fine. That's it's almost like I'm thinking it's almost like a public understanding of science activity, which is fine. But that sounds a bit hyper lawyer, whatever. But I think that's very important. We're not trying. It's interesting.
Yeah, so wider engagement with
it's a general wider engagement, right?
Which is part of the remit of disseminating technical knowledge and information through the community and essential for proper community governance. And
I think that has to, I'm not for those who don't know. I was going to say David Bellamy or whatever. We don't have to have one of those, but we can actually at least turn up and chat to people. Yes.
Great. Should we move on to cover the last 2 points quickly? So point number 4, I've set up a doodle poll to rearrange the call. I've only had, I think, 2 responses so far. So if you care to do that today, I can then try to rearrange the slot with the Intersect board. I appreciate that everything is very busy at the moment, so it may not be possible to do that, but at least we can try.
Is that in the Slack channel?
It was, I believe, in the Slack channel.
If you could pin it, then I would know where to. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I think it's still important to try to have the meeting. I think we've been forced to move on.
Well, I would agree, and my hope is it will be public like the last one, get publicly recorded.
Kevin, just looking in the channel, this might be the last one that I see. I think there's only one date on it, and it's for today. Oh no, there's one for tomorrow as well.
Is that
possibly tomorrow is the last date. So let's see. So then we might need to see whether we can make that date. And the problem was the dates were set only about a week in advance and around Easter, so it wasn't a very convenient set of dates, particularly because everyone has very busy schedules.
Does the date tomorrow clash with the
reconciliation?
Yeah.
I think it was proposed to be just after the reconciliation.
Follows on straight after.
Okay. I must. I can do that. Add it in.
Yeah. So it's immediately after the budget proposal review meeting.
Who needs sleep?
So what I would probably propose doing is to, assuming we can get sufficient representation from the TSC at that meeting to confirm the date tomorrow, but it needs to be done quickly, I think. Great. Okay. Final item on the agenda for this meeting, pump maintenance contract. So update from delivery assurance. So Duncan, maybe you'd like to take that, or Matt, Duncan or Matt.
I can, well, following on to the actions of last week, so I understand that we had, Ricky on record regards his view on the contract, and obviously the TSCs around going back to an older version. Forgive me, I don't know what version number that got tracked as. We will still action that. I'll look to action that, but Lawrence has been away on leave over Easter, so I won't get a chance to speak to him until next week.
Okay.
But we will take it as an action that it was minuted as the desires of those two groups or those two key stakeholders. So we will pick it up with them. But unfortunately, it won't happen this week.
That's fine. So, Duncan attend, and I think did you attend the last delivery assurance meeting, Matt? So Duncan attended the last delivery assurance meeting.
Yes, I did.
Also there, and I attended and represented the TSC perspective in Neil's absence. So I provided input. So we provided input to the Cortec team. Work is progressing nicely, focusing mostly on things like UTX OHD delivery, on reducing technical debt, on networking improvements, and on Ouroboros Genesis. So that's the short-term perspective. So things taking over nicely there. What I would expect is there are a few more things to flush from the backlog, but then I would expect him to be looking around for direction, new major things to do. So hopefully we can get to a position where we can start to set major directions for the core team. Johnny.
I'm not sure if it forms a part of the maintenance contract, but it possibly does. There's been a pre-release of 10.3.1 of the Cardano node itself, and it has integrated being able to build using GHC 9.6. So going up from the 8 point.
Yeah. No. Yes, I can speak to that. this has been a long-term goal to get things sorted and to get basically move on to a newer compiler. And there were various issues in various parts of the code that meant it was a performance regression. And all of those have been resolved. So it's actually looking like a reasonable, it is a reasonable thing to do. And we gain a few % of extra performance out of it.
And in addition, with 10.3, there have been some internal performance improvements as well. So the team's taken the opportunity to make some performance improvements. So you should see things, the performance generally improving across the board, Johnny.
Yeah.
I
mean, you could be specific about the numbers, but people's mileages will vary, as they say, right, with the process. It looks like a very good thing.
Anecdotal reports from within the IoT technical community Discord have been very positive so far.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
I mean, that's
It's looking like a very solid release, Johnny. The next release will incorporate. So this has the final feature which is needed for Ouroboros Genesis. This is lightweight checkpointing. So we're going to be pushing that with the rollout there with the SPO community over the next few weeks. And then for Node version 10.4, what we're expecting is the first integration of the UTXO-HD solution. This is the LNDB backend. So informally, that's looking very good. We're seeing some very good reductions in memory usage. The LNDB backend, we don't expect to have sufficient performance for stake pools or possibly relays, but it's still potentially valuable for dataless users, for example,
or other edge nodes.
Or other edge nodes. We won't be rushing to push this out because we have changed the team has changed the common interface to the UTXO set. So we wouldn't want to risk there being some kind of residual error that could affect people who are not using the new backend.
And the main aim here is, if once we move this interface across, we could maintaining two interfaces, which is expensive, can be, once it's give us a release that the old interface will no longer be maintained, which is fine because no one will be using it. But again, this is about addressing long-term technical debt as well.
Indeed, it's been in the works quite a long time, Neil. It's the only reason really why it's not been released sooner is because other things have had priority. 660 wars had priority, for example.
So
we didn't want to disrupt the rollout there. But now it's good to actually have this on track, and this will enable the LSM integration as well. So I'm not going to publicly give away anything about the memory sizes other than say the test results we've seen so far look extremely promising, and they look as if we should be able to operate stake pools on relatively small, substantially smaller than current memory configurations.
Can I just to say that, and the point there is, this may change the economics of stake pool operators who are running inside cloud instances for the better. Okay.
Yeah, or even enable people to run on certain types of low-cost equipment.
We have a running joke about getting it working on a Raspberry Pi 5. Okay.
That's not a running joke, Neil, as I understand.
It's a running game. Okay, let's put it that way. It's not a joke. It's a running. We jibe each other to achieve it, right? It's a goal.
Yeah. Marcus.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask is, so on the performance regression tests, what is the main thing that you look or you fear? Is it because of not in memory UTXO storage generally is slower, and you still want to keep it within a certain validation or adoption range, or is it because the new lower memory demand allows operators to go for low powered or less powered instances like a Raspberry Pi, and then you see a risk that it takes longer and we are not in a time frame anymore?
Okay, so all of these things we assess, right? When I work with the benchmarking team, for me, the key that what I always have this risk that of success causing us trouble. If having something that breaks the relationship between the UTXO set and the amount of memory needed is really important, because were we to suddenly get 10 times as many UTXOs, the system would become, the costs would become very high for people who are buying this or having to upgrade equipment. So for me, the key risk I think that is trying to be managed here is not failing under growth of UTXO size, right?
Okay.
The time now the timings are all looking good. There's not huge amounts of regression. We don't know. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the UTX on the hard disk back-ended versions, so we can start properly benchmarking it. That has not yet been done. Okay, it's just the results from people doing tests on their machines suggest it should be good. It hasn't been formally benchmarked yet.
Yeah, and Marcus, to answer your question about lower powered CPUs, I'm not expecting that to be a significant issue.
Okay, good.
Great. Should we cut this meeting short at this point?
Yeah.
Yep, happy to do that.
Well, okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Excellent.
Okay then. Thank you. See you the other side. Bye.
Bye.